Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Saturday, March 9th. It is 2 days away from the start of the legal tampering period in the NFL, basically signaling the beginning of free agency, which should be exciting. We've got a lot to get into. We have reached March. March is already flying by. DiMari, a lot to get into today. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited for free agency to open up on Monday. We've seen a lot of guys get released. A lot of things seem to be moving around. Combine ended pretty well. So I've never felt this much excitement about free agency before. It seems like we're still in football season. So I'm excited to get into our topics for today.
Yeah, definitely a lot to discuss. This is episode 3. As always, make sure please like and subscribe. We'll have a lot more content coming your way throughout the rest of the off season. Of course, really things starting to just heat up now post combine, which was last weekend. So exciting time. So a lot to discuss today. We'll get into some trade stuff. We'll get into the Russell Wilson stuff to open, the Bills, Dalton Schultz comments. We'll also get into some different stuff with free agency a little bit later on, giving some predictions as, of course, it begins on Monday. But we'll start with Russell Wilson as things are starting to heat up there for him, going around. A couple teams he's visited, went to the Giants, went to the Steelers. It seems like the Steelers was more of a longer meeting, more of a more in-depth meeting, I guess. The Giants was kind of just a quick thing, see if they're, kind of mutual interest, I guess, on both sides. But after being cut by Denver, he's looking for another team, and it looks like he potentially could find another team here pretty quickly. What are your just overall thoughts here to start before we get into the different angles? Because really there's 3 teams that are involved in all this and what those 3 teams look like without Russell Wilson. So what are just some of your opening thoughts here as he has visited Pittsburgh and New York?
Well, I really hate how Denver handled the situation. I mean, I know as far as the roster, looking at it kind of top to bottom, there's some quality names on that roster that kind of just didn't perform for Denver and haven't performed, which is why we're seeing a lot of guys get released from the Broncos. A lot of guys have been on the trade market, it seems like, every year since they've been in the league. So, just to handle how they did with Russell Wilson, where it seems like the ship came sinking and it all fell down on him, I feel was quite messed up, from his perspective. But I guess at the end of the day, he's still winning because they have to pay him regardless for these next 2 years, and they are in cap space disaster for
Yeah.
the next 2 years with his deal. So I mean, more power to Russ. You get a fresh start. You get to go somewhere with these bigger market teams. I guess we can say. I think he still has a lot in the tank to be successful in the NFL. So the 2 teams that he did visit, I think would be an upgrade for him. Just get that pressure off of him from trying to succeed, let's say Peyton Manning, because that's been the last big name quarterback for Denver. So kind of just trying to get under the shadows of Peyton Manning and just be Russell Wilson wherever he goes.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and I guess that's where we can start here with the Broncos perspective. It was a very interesting breakup. It was a very interesting the whole 2 years there. He starts with Nathaniel Hackett. At first it felt like you just go back to Nathaniel Hackett hire. It felt like they were hiring Hackett to bring in Rodgers. It always felt like that
Mm-hmm.
they wanted Rodgers there, and it was like Russell Wilson was their option too. So then you get Russell Wilson. It's almost like they settled for him. He wasn't their number one guy. It never worked in year 1. And then they brought in Sean Payton to help Russell Wilson. And it was like Sean Payton, they bailed on him. So it was a very interesting time. Of course, there was things Russell Wilson didn't play very well. I thought he was better this past year than 2022. He was horrible in 2022. But then there was also some locker room stuff, but they bailed on him during the win streak. The whole contract, I think you walk away from this, the Broncos are really feeling the effects. It's like they're in post Russell Wilson prison here. They're feeling more of the effects than Russell Wilson himself, because Wilson, he's going to get another opportunity quickly here with another team, while Denver now has to kind of revert back to square one, and they're going to have to enter a pretty large rebuild. And with the whole cap situation, it's going to cost them some other guys. You hear Cortland Sutton potentially on the trade block, Jerry Jeudy. Those are your top 2 receivers. Obviously, you don't have a quarterback. So they walk away from this in a really bad spot. But it just felt like from the start that it was just not going to work. And this stretch of years since 2015, when they won the Super Bowl and beat in Super Bowl 50, beat the Panthers, ever since Peyton Manning announced his retirement, Denver is still looking for that quarterback that can get them back to the playoffs, that can get them back to being relevant, get them back to that team that they had all those years with Peyton Manning. And, they've gone through a whole lot of them. Brock Osweiler, you had Drew Lock, you had Russell Wilson, Joe Flacco, Teddy Bridgewater, Paxton Lynch. I mean, there's more and more. So they're back to square one. So before we get into the Steelers and Giants, where do the Broncos go from here? Do you see it being a stopgap? Do they maybe go after, I don't think a Fields is realistic, but a younger option? I think it's going to be probably a 1-year rental, a bridge quarterback, win 4 or 5 games, and then get a top pick for next year, get a top 5 pick, and maybe get the first bidding for a Shadur Sanders, who is expected to be the top quarterback coming out next year. Do you see that being the case for them? Because the fallout from this is pretty ugly.
Well, first of all, they are. I think right now they're kind of in panic mode. I mean, again, kind of going back to some of the releases for Denver. Justin Simmons is the one that really pops
Yeah.
up. You release one of the best safeties in the NFL, in my opinion, who was just coming off a Pro Bowl season, and then you release him just to clear up some cap space. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't want to say unheard of, but kind of just doesn't make much sense as far as what they're doing. But I mean, I guess when you are that much under the cap, you kind of got to free whatever space you
Yeah.
can. But just kind of looking at Denver, they do have pick 12 in this upcoming draft. So I honestly think they go quarterback. I mean, depending on who's on the board at the time, obviously not Caleb Williams, not Drake May. Sitting at 12, I mean, we might be talking about maybe a Michael Penix, maybe a JJ McCarthy, somebody like that, which is still, I think, a bit of a panic mode, because I don't know if Denver actually wants to take one of those guys that high. But I mean, at this rate, you have no quarterback. So, and very limited cap space, and I think a very hostile work environment, as you can see with some of the stuff that Denver's been through over the course of the last few years. So, and this situation is kind of, I guess you can say, let's draft a guy, use him as a bridge maybe, and then try to maybe get a seasoned vet come next year. But as of right now, Denver is screwed. So the best bet is let's just draft a quarterback, and I don't want to say tank, but you really don't got much to play for.
No, they're in a tough spot. And you also see Pat Surtain the other day tweet out about Justin Simmons being let go. And it seems like they were close. And that could, I don't know, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but Surtain maybe down the road might be on his way out. So it's a tough spot for them. And they, with the 12th overall pick, like you said, Penix, maybe you could go after maybe a JJ McCarthy, but then again, it feels like they're not going to have much talent around them. You're not going to be able to do much to build around them. You're kind of setting them up for failure. It's a tough spot. I could see maybe a world where later rounds, they take a developmental pick, let them sit for a year and have a bridge quarterback. Then next year, draft somebody high, maybe have some sort of competition. They're in a really difficult spot. Look, when you go all in on a quarterback, when you go all in on a little, like a couple year window to hope that Russell Wilson would come here, get this team in the playoffs, and eventually win a championship, the fallout effects are going to be pretty bad. So the Broncos are in a really bad spot. After what looked like when they signed Russell Wilson, being a team that could potentially be a threat in the AFC, they are now back to being probably a 4-win team. And for Sean Payton, you wonder if this is really what he signed up for. He took a year off. Is he really willing to go all in on a rebuild for the next couple of years? Or is that going to, he's older now. Does he have what it takes to go all in on a rebuild, or did he come here to try and capitalize on a 1-2 year window, Russell Wilson? So it's a tricky spot, and they have not shown the ability since Peyton Manning to go out and get a quarterback. So for the fan base, there can't be much trust in the organization to draft the right guy or sign the right guy, because they haven't been able to do that. So really, really tricky spot for Denver, and they're left with a lot of unknowns as they stare into the abyss at many positions. They're going to need wide receiver help. They just got rid of their best safety. You make the argument their best player on defense. No quarterback. So they are one of these teams in the offseason here that have so many questions and probably not many answers. So when you look at now the Steelers' perspective, and of course the Giants here as well, I'll be honest with you on this. I like Kirk Cousins personally as a better option over Russell Wilson for the Steelers. I just think he's better right now. I thought Russell Wilson was better this year, but he's just not the same player he once was. And again, as I mentioned to open, there's both sides were to blame. The Broncos, they were to blame. And of course, Russell Wilson also had blame. But just from a Steelers perspective, I feel personally they would be better off going after a Fields or Kirk Cousins rather than Russell Wilson because I just don't really know how much Russell Wilson has left in the tank and the cap hit of this all. It's and I know obviously Broncos are going to be paying a lot of his salary, but do you feel the Steelers are a good landing spot? How do you like it? It's kind of it's a weird mix between the two. I wouldn't expect all these years hearing Russell Wilson to the Steelers, but here we are.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be kind of weird to see him in black and gold if he does end up with the Steelers, but I do think I like the landing spot just because right now he's kind of not after a big contract. He just wants that fresh start. He just wants to go somewhere where he can be Russell Wilson. So I don't think from Pittsburgh he is asking for a lot of money. And as far as that situation, I mean, Kirk Cousins wants some money, and I just don't think
Yeah.
Pittsburgh is willing to pay that. They're kind of in a situation where they're not fully giving up on Kenny Pickett, but as they stated, we just want somebody to pressure him a little bit, bring in some competition so Pickett can still be the starter next year. I feel like if Kirk Cousins comes over, that's your guaranteed starter, and you kind of just you put Kenny Pickett on the back burner. Whereas far as Russell Wilson, I think he's at that stage in his career where he might have to be a backup because like you just said, his last few years he hasn't looked his best. So I think just far as financially for Pittsburgh and just trying to compete in the North, Russell Wilson is a great spot. So that quarterback room they have now with those defenses and the talent in that division, I mean, their quarterback room is not competitive enough for Pittsburgh to win that division. I mean, I know they did just make the playoffs, but that a lot of that stemmed from the defense where there's still questions about the offense. Now you bring in Arthur Smith, which I feel like is no better of a pickup for them considering how he did in Atlanta. So for them, I think you go get Russ. That might be your best option. You might get, a cheap quarterback could be a bridge guy, somebody that Kenny Pickett can mentor for a year or two, and you kind of just let Russ rock out. I think he has enough. Again, I think he has enough in the tank for Pittsburgh to be a pretty good team, and I think he's more well seasoned than Pickett or Justin Fields to kind of get that team over the hump.
Yeah, I agree. I think that perspective is definitely right where they were a 10-win team last year with Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph,
Mason
all those guys.
Rudolph.
Like it was a disaster. So and that's been my point too. Like if you bring in a Kirk Cousins now, it's gonna be a lot more expensive, but Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, like as much as Russell Wilson's not the same player he once was, and ever since that 2020 season where he threw for 40 touchdowns and a big year, he's been in the 20s, and then I think 2022 he had 16 touchdowns last year. He's back up to 26, but he hasn't had that big 30 plus touchdown year. He's just not the same guy, but he is better than Mitch. He's better than Mason Rudolph. He is better than Kenny Pickett. So a year or two in Pittsburgh, they would be competitive, especially if that defense plays more like they were earlier in the year. They can easily be a 10-win team with Russell Wilson. I think that's probably going to be the case. But, then after that, you have his questions. I think Russell Wilson, the biggest thing is I just don't think he's the guy anymore that can take a team, and you probably agree, take a team over the top. I
Yeah,
just
no,
that's
no, not
that's
at
not going to
all.
happen. Especially in the AFC. You're at most, I think you're going to have Russell Wilson can get you to a wild card, maybe win you a wild card game at most, but that's about it. I mean, he hasn't made, the last year and towards the tail end there in Seattle, things started to fall out a little bit. And of course, no playoffs in the 2 years with Denver. But then again, this was a Denver team that was in the conversation for the playoffs before they ended up benching him in the weird
Mhm.
situation that happened after they went on that long win streak. So the whole Pittsburgh thing, like, I just don't really think the Steelers can go wrong with a quarterback because they had such bad quarterback play last year that whoever they bring in, it's probably going to be an upgrade, unless if they bring in like Zach Wilson, then that's not going to be an upgrade. That'd be getting worse. But anybody they bring in is really an upgrade. So same thing here for Russell Wilson. Although I don't know. I don't love him for the Giants. I'll say that.
Not
Steelers, I
no.
can understand more. For the Giants, I just would not do that at all. What is your feelings on the Giants stuff? Do you believe it's going to actually happen? It seems like it was more of a small meeting, nothing major. It was kind of just felt like it was on his way to Pittsburgh. Oh, let me stop at the Giants. It doesn't seem like there's much there. But what is your reaction to that?
Yeah, the whole Giant situation, just them as a team in general, they're just a mess. I mean, I don't think it was nothing serious. I think it was just one of those things kind of mind games with Daniel Jones, where it's like, hey, you're getting to that point where if you don't figure it out, we're gonna bring somebody in that will. But other than like you said, just a quick visit, let me stop New Jersey, get a slice of pizza maybe before I head over to Pitt. I don't think it's nothing too crazy as far as them two. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I also just don't think it makes any sense. Like the
Yeah.
Steelers, I feel makes a little bit more sense because they already have, they just invested into Kenny Pickett and they feel, okay, maybe they want him to sit a year or two, or they're kind of in that bridge gap. The Giants just doesn't make sense especially for Brian Dable. They're a completely different situation where Mike Tomlin, he's not at risk really of losing his job. He'll probably end up retiring before he actually gets fired. For the Giants' perspective, this offseason to me makes or breaks. This offseason to me is going to depend on Brian Dable and Joe Shane, whether or not they're going to have a job next year or the year after that. Getting Russell Wilson is just not going to cut it. You can't go from Daniel Jones to, oh, let's draft a quarterback to, oh, let's bring in a guy that's 35 years old at the end of his career, bring him in for 2 years. You're just losing the complete direction of that franchise. Like, there's just no sense. For the Steelers, a little bit more, it's more of that bridge guy can help you get to the playoffs. The Giants need to build from the ground up. New regime still 2 years. This will be their third season. They were in the playoffs, a year ago. It just doesn't make any sense, especially in this market. If he struggles, they're going to get absolutely destroyed. They're going to get destroyed.
And back to my point of the Giants. I mean, and like you basically just said it, where the situation just wouldn't make sense. And I think for the Giants, they kind of are in panic mode, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
know about that much in panic mode. I mean, you look at the rest of the division from the Giants' perspective. I mean, if your second best team is winning 12 to 13 games, whether that's Dallas or whether that's Philly, and then we got a Washington team that I think is going to be so much better with Dan Quinn than they were the last few years. I mean, if you're the Giants, I mean, you're kind of in a situation where you're like, who can we possibly bring in to compete with these other three teams? Because Daniel Jones isn't going to do it. Russell Wilson isn't going to do it. So just the whole situation of maybe them trying to make it work, I just don't see it happening. And I think you just said it perfectly where Dable, if they do go Russell Wilson and all goes wrong in year one, I mean, he's already on the hot seat as it is. So they bring in Russell Wilson and that doesn't work out, he's going to be
Yeah.
out of there. So I think for the Giants is kind of, you want to take your time. I don't want to say trust Daniel Jones, but I mean you did just give him a contract extension, but maybe bring in a vet for some quarterback competition, kind of how Pittsburgh is planning on doing. But Russell Wilson is not the answer for the Giants, and I just feel that ending just as ugly as it did in Denver if he does go there.
Yeah, it would just be setting them back because their whole point right now is look towards the future, either stick with Daniel Jones or bring in a rookie with the 6th overall pick, a Jaden Daniels, somebody like that, JJ McCarthy maybe. Let them either sit behind Daniel Jones or let them compete at camp and then go out there and see who wins the job. Russell Wilson, it would make no sense because then they would be setting themselves back. If he doesn't work out, he might be here for a year. Then you're in the same exact spot you're in last year. And we know Russell Wilson's not the quarterback that's going to get you over the top. It's not like you're looking to go after, I don't know. Let's just say hypothetically it was like Joe Burrow that was available or somebody like that, or Rodgers last year. Then I could see it. But Russell Wilson he's 35 years old. It just doesn't make sense. They're looking towards the future. They need to build from the ground up. They went 6-11. Russell Wilson's not going to go in there and win them 12 games and turn that franchise around. It's just not going to happen. And especially like you said, that division, Washington's going to get better. They're starting to turn things around. They're looking towards the future. The Cowboys are obviously good right now. The Eagles are an interesting spot. They've got some young pieces, but like they're still good. Like I feel like they're going to be back in the conversation again. The Cowboys are always going to be there. They've just got to figure out a way to figure it out in the playoffs. If the Giants would bring in Russell Wilson, they could quickly become a year or two from now the worst team in that division if Washington goes along this trajectory of drafting a quarterback. Drake May turns out to be good. And if the Giants try and get on the shortcut path, it just wouldn't make any sense. So probably repeat myself a couple times there, but just no to that. The media too would rip him into shreds. They would, no pun intended, but they would destroy him. I was trying to make a joke about Broncos country, let's ride, but it didn't work there. So either way, when you do look at the Giants, though, they do have some interesting decisions to make. One of those is Saquon Barkley. What do you think is going to happen to him? There's been some interest, it seems, between him and the Eagles. Do you see him returning with the Giants? How do you see that whole situation playing out?
No to the Giants. Their situation, how it was handled, was a slap in the face to him. I don't see it happening. I know he said the interest kind of for Saquon is Philly and Dallas, so I think he has the vendetta where he will stay in the division because he wants to prove a point to the Giants. But I sadly, I think I'm gonna fall to my knees if this news breaks that he lands in Philly. But that's just kind of what I see happening, considering they are one of those teams that run the ball so well. And I know they had Jason Kelsey retired, but I just feel like still the rest of that offensive line, they run the ball so well. So Saquon can be his best self, not taking a lot of hits and all those other things. So I think he goes to Philly. Dallas isn't even going to make a push at him. They're probably going to bring him in, give him a tour of the stadium, and call it a day. Get him some Whataburger and send him off to wherever he goes. So I think he's going to end up with Philly.
Yeah, it seems like the Philly stuff is really gaining some traction. I don't think he'll end up with the Giants or back with the Giants. It doesn't seem like they're willing to go to where he wants in terms of a contract. And also, if there is mutual interest there with the Eagles, then obviously seems to be more interested in there. And I think too, he's 27 years old. Not that he's old, but he's been in the league now for 6 seasons. He's dealt with some injuries. He's at that point of his career now where he might look more towards a team that can try and get him to the playoffs, maybe get him a championship. And while the Eagles obviously went through a complete defense or a coaching staff overhaul, they've still got talent. I know that Jason Kelsey retired, but they're going to be back in the conversation next year, and so is Dallas. Looking at those two teams in the division, those two teams are the top 2 teams in the division. You're probably going to get to the playoffs with those teams. Giants, you can't say the same about that. And for a running back of his age, 6 years in the league for a running back is a long time, right? He's going to want to get to that point of his career. If he signs a 2-3-year contract, it's going to be with a team that he feels in all 3 of those seasons he can have a chance of winning. You really can't say that about the Giants. And the Giants might have a 6-win year this year with a rookie quarterback. And the next year, you got to see. Not everybody's going to be C.J. Stroud in year 1, but the Giants just have a lot of work to do. They're not a very talented team. They're just not. They have so much work to do. Quarterback is a question. They've got the receiver needs some help. They're I don't want to be so negative, but when you look at their talent, like they're one of the least talented teams in the NFL. They don't have much talent at all. They just don't.
Yeah, that's it. It kind of, when we're talking about Russell Wilson, I feel like it's, if he was to go to the Giants, just say it's the Carolina Panthers all over again. I
Like
mean,
who's he going to throw to? Yeah,
it's not going to work. I mean, it's not, and I don't think you're being negative. I think you're being truthful. Where that roster, I mean, is terrible. You take out just offensively, they were one of the worst offensive lines in all of football last year. And if you just take out Saquon from that, which already looks like that's going to happen, and you take out Darren Waller from that, the Giants have nobody. So I mean, anybody willing to go to the Giants right now, it's kind of failure that you're setting yourself up for. But realistically, I think you're just being 100% honest. Where talent wise, they might be one of the worst, if not worse than Carolina, when it comes to just the roster in general.
Yeah, I've got some current concerns too. I'm glad you brought up Darren Waller. And he made the tweet about potentially retiring. It seems like he's a guy that even if he's back, you wonder how motivated he's really going to be.
Yeah.
And they're giving him all that money. Like this Waller thing is reaching very dangerous territory to blowing up in their face. I mean, this was a guy last year that had 52 receptions for 552 yards. They're not, it wasn't terrible, but for a guy that's had seasons where he's had over 90 to 100 receptions for over 1,000 yards, I mean, this is a guy that it was a PPR beast in fantasy football when he's healthy. Wasn't very healthy last year, missed a couple games. I think he only played in 12 games. I know the quarterback issues didn't help, but they're in a tough spot. You lose Darren Waller, Saquon, you're left with no tight end, you're left with no running back, questions at the quarterback, offensive line needs some help. Although you hope that some of these guys can maybe develop with the offensive line. It's a tough spot. Xavier McKinney as well, hit the open market. Their safety, one of the best players in defense. So yeah, they've got some young guys like, Kayvon Thibodeau's, solid. Bobby Okereke had a good year last year, but outside of that, it's slim
That's it.
pickings for them. They hope that Jalen Hyatt can develop and Wandale Robinson, but those are also guys that are second round picks. I mean, what are they really going to, are they going to, or I think Hyatt was a third round pick, but are they going to really turn into your 1-2 punch? So it's interesting, really interesting. And of course, Sterling Shepard's another guy too. So they got a lot of work to do and a lot of questions. I don't expect the Giants to be very competitive next year, but that's just me. I could be wrong. Nobody expected them to make the playoffs, so we'll see. But moving on from that, we'll remain here in the division where the Giants, we discussed a little bit of the Eagles. We'll now go to Dallas. We actually even discussed a little bit of the Commanders as well. Dalton Schultz this week commented on the Cowboys culture, their former tight end. I'll just let you kind of express this one. What is your reaction to him taking a little bit of a shot at the organization?
Wow. Okay. I'm all over the place with this. I mean, to the point, I called my dad yesterday. We had maybe a 30, 45-minute conversation kind of on this whole topic. He's been a Cowboys fan his whole life. But personally, I don't see much wrong with Dalton Schultz said. But then again, at the same time, I kind of do. If you kind of looked at some of the comments he was talking about, he compared the culture to a zoo where he was talking about being in the weight room and you got fans doing tours and tapping on glass and that type of stuff. Where I feel as a player, like, yes, that could be distracting, but then again, you are America's biggest brand. And I mean, you kind of know what you sign up for when you do have that star on your helmet. So for some guys, it is a distraction. For some guys, it's not a distraction. But as many people that feel Dalton Schultz is salty for many situations where it's well, maybe it's because Dallas didn't give him the contract that he wanted, and some people might feel, Cowboys Twitter, I don't know if they're trolling or what, but some are kind of like Dalton Schultz, who we got Jake Ferguson. At the end of the day, Dalton Schultz gets the last laugh. I mean, he just signed the contract, very identical to for what Dallas wanted to give him. And
Yep.
if I'm Dalton Schultz, I'm like, look, I've been in Dallas for 5 years, and I just made it further than you have in my 1 year with the Houston Texans, who we thought were going to win 6 games. So at the end of the day, I mean, I have nothing to be mad about if I'm Dalton Schultz. So I'm kind of just glad he brought up those comments because after the season ended, after the heartbreaking loss to Green Bay, I took some time to reflect on whether my mental health was worth being a Cowboys fan or not. And it kind of just kicked in that there is a culture issue in Dallas. And I mean, season ended for Dallas in January, and we are now in March, and this is starting to come back up. But talked to some friends of mine, talked to my dad, where I've just told him, yeah, I mean, the culture in Dallas, you can kind of tell it's all about entertainment. And I know this is going to be like a weird analogy, but Jerry Jones, in my opinion, I know the NFL is an entertainment business, but we're talking about real guys making real money. Our real goal is to win a Super Bowl. Where I feel like Jerry Jones treats it like it's WWE, where it's all fake and it's all publicity, and it's like, hey, as long as I'm making some money and the stadium is getting packed on Sunday, and we're doing tours throughout the week at the stadium, at your practice facility. Who cares if we win another Super Bowl? I mean, I've already won 5, and as long as I go and tell the fans I'm all in this year, they're gonna buy back in eventually. And that's kind of at the point where Dallas is at. I don't see them winning another Super Bowl with the culture issue that obviously we can tell because just every year now they got no fight in them come playoff time, and they just lay down. So I mean, for Dalton Schultz, I'm glad he came out and said what he said, and maybe that would change some things for some guys in the locker room on how they kind of come into this season. Because right now you're even a bigger laughing stock than you were after the playoff loss. So yeah, hats off to Dalton Schultz. I think that needed to be said.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the biggest thing with the Dallas, none of this stuff will, I guess, ever die down until they eventually get back to the Super Bowl and eventually win one. Because the biggest thing continues to be their playoff issues and not getting anywhere. And like you mentioned, Dalton Schultz in 1 year with CJ Stroud, a rookie quarterback, got further than the Dallas did with the 7 seed coming into, or the, yeah, right, 7 seed coming into their own building and beating them, in Green Bay with Jordan Love. So it's, from his perspective, he has he could talk all day because of what happened this past year, and he had a very productive season. He also just got paid again, and I think for Houston's perspective, their future outlook is probably a little bit cleaner and a little bit more clear than Dallas is, where you might be
Absolutely.
looking for a coach this time next year. So from his perspective, yeah, I agree with you. He could talk all day. The one thing I will say about Dallas though is, if they were, for example, and Jerry Jones is a very public figure, but maybe to try and look at this from, I don't know if it's a glass half full perspective or if it's just a different angle. It's not like that you guys are a dumpster fire. It's not like you guys, like, just from a Jets perspective. The culture is terrible with the Jets. You hear about the leaks, you hear about, coaching staff, the game plan. Nathaniel Hackett's not willing to isn't meeting with coaches until late in the week. They describe the locker room as kind of just a do whatever you want. There's not much structure. All these sources with Zach Wilson not being reluctant to play during last year, all that stuff, giving up on the season, Saleh wanting to take the coach's phones. Like, there is no, like, they don't have any success on the field. They won 7 games. They've won 7 games last 2 years, haven't made the playoffs in 13 years. My point with Dallas is, while these are, I guess, concerns, you're still a 12-win team every year. You're still a team that's in the playoffs every year. So I feel like, it feels like maybe it's just, that's their culture. Like, do you feel that maybe it feels like that's just their culture, which, like I said, it's kind of tough to word this, but it's not like it's like a death sentence that this is their culture, because they're still winning games. They're still getting to the playoffs. I know they're not reaching where they want to get to, but for a culture to be really bad, usually you don't see results on the field, similar to the Jets. The Panthers are another example of that. They've had a toxic culture for years. Washington's had a toxic culture. So for Dallas, while it seems like the culture is issues, I feel like it might not be as bad as it seems, because they still are finding ways to have success. Maybe that's just the way they run things. They're a big market. He mentioned how it feels like there's always people watching you and stuff like that. I don't know. Does that make sense at all? Like, I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
it could be worse in a way.
I see where you're coming from, and I know NFL and college is two different levels,
Yeah.
but I'm going to compare it just as simple as this. So you just said Dallas wins 12 games every year, and they're getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs.
Yep.
So, I mean, look at it like Ohio State and Michigan. I mean, if Ryan Day every year is winning every single game, and at the end of the day you're losing to Michigan State, Penn State, and Michigan every year,
Mhm.
I mean, they don't care that you won 9 games, and they
Yeah.
don't care that you're playing in the Fiesta Bowl. They're going to get rid of you because you're flatlining. I mean, you're just been here, and that's where Dallas is at. I mean, 12 wins in 3 years with McCarthy as coach. I mean, yes, that is impressive. 12 wins in the NFL is very hard to come by. But I mean, at what point are those 12 wins just like, all right, we need to get to 13, which in 13 being in this case, I'm talking about winning in the first round of the playoffs. We need to get to 13. I mean, it doesn't matter if we're going 12-5. When are we going to get over that hump and finally win a playoff game? And like you said perfectly, it is a big market, which is what's making it so much worse. Because I mean, people are coming in every year. We're talking about these experts and these analysts. It's not a surprise to anybody that Dallas is winning 12 games. I mean, it's almost, I would say, a given now that they're going to win 12 games. They're going to compete. They're going to be right there for the division. But you also know it's a tale of two tapes when it comes playoff time, where in that first round of the playoffs, outside of Tampa, 2 years ago, Dallas is getting sent home. I mean, you have no faith in them after the regular season ends. And I mean, I know for myself, but definitely some other fans. And again, like my whole family likes Dallas, where we get to into playoff time. And I mean, all confidence is just completely gone because they're just not going to show up. And I mean,
Mhm.
Mike McCarthy every year, this has been a guy who, for the past few years, who will look in the camera and say, we just weren't ready to play. I mean, inexcusable. 12-win NFL team, the biggest brand in all of football, couldn't practice hard enough and prepare hard enough to be the 7th seed who came in your building and dropped 50 on you, as
Hmm.
if I'm watching the SEC play like the MAC. No disrespect to
Yeah.
anybody in college, but that's kind of the point I'm at. I mean, yeah, 12 wins, it's good, it's great, but at what point are you going to finally get over that hump? And I mean, I guess I'm gonna end it off on this far, circle it back to you. We're talking about the Cardinals, the Texans, the Seahawks, the Browns are all teams that have made it further than Dallas within like the last 5 years.
Hmm.
So I mean that's starting to be a problem when you look at the brand that Dallas has built compared to everybody else. It's culture and a lot more. Jerry Jones is a big part of that too.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is it ultimately if just Jerry Jones is one of those kind of meddlesome owners where he's got a lot of say, a lot of power, and that's why there hasn't been many coaches recently that have been able to succeed there. And that's the thing is if any other team went and won 12 games every year, they would take it. But since it's Dallas, since it's Jerry Jones, and he's gone through all these like just keeps recycling coaches. That's why I guess what I'm trying to get at a little bit to respond to what you said there is you wonder if they just feel so much more pressure. Like any coach that comes in there and we're not prepared to play, like Mike McCarthy said, and even you said as a fan, like once playoffs come around, you're you're worried. You don't have any confidence, because it's the same things happen over and over again. And you feel like maybe that's the same. The players embody that, and the coaching as well. Once they get to the playoffs, they realize we have an owner that is like that controls everything. The guy is a nut in a way, like he's crazy. Um, Maybe he just puts too much pressure, and I feel like for a while now, Jerry Jones has needed to like take a step back.
Mm.
They almost take it, like, but he won't do that, and that's the problem. I'll just say that overall, there are so many sports where there are just owners that are just ridiculous. Woody Johnson's for the Jets is one. David Tepper in Carolina. These people, they're billionaires. They don't know what a football looks like, and they continue to just have so much power, do everything. It's insanity. It's the same doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's feel like that's the thing with Dallas. Um, like Jerry Jones got to look himself in the mirror, and every coach, Jason Garrett didn't work. Mike McCarthy here didn't work. And McCarthy's a good coach. He's won a Super Bowl. He was a big reason why Aaron Rodgers was what he has become. And they might bail on him at the end of this year, but you can't build continuity that way. You really can't build a culture. What a coach is supposed to do, and that's the problem with Jerry Jones, like you said,
Yep.
it's Jerry Jones's culture. What a coach is supposed to do is come in and build his own culture. It's tough to do that in
And
Dallas. I think until Jerry Jones takes a step back, it's going to be a way. But if other teams that would take the 12 wins, but when you have an owner like that is quick to jump ship, stuff.
that's back to up again when I talked to my dad about it. And that's why the stadium is called Jerry's World, because everything, and this is his word, and it makes sense. This is why the stadium is called Jerry's World, because everything that goes in at AT&T Stadium, it's Jerry's way or no way. And I guess now this is all coming full circle back to Dalton Schultz, where now it's making sense where how he's saying, in Houston, if unless you are a big football fan, a Houston fan, you don't even know who the owner of Houston is. You have probably no idea. In Houston, it is literally all about football. That is all you hear when it comes out of Houston. And Dalton Schultz is saying in Dallas, well, you got the star. And the star as in on the helmet and the practice facility, where I mean they have a shopping plaza at the practice facility in Frisco, Texas. That
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely unheard of, like anywhere. And you're
Yeah.
doing stadium tours and you're doing practice facility tours. And I mean, you have a hotel. No, I don't know how many teams have it, but Dallas has the Omni Hotel where the players stay in for games, where fans can also stay. So you got fans lining up at the Omni Hotel for Dallas players to sign autographs and all this other stuff. And that is what Dalton Schultz is saying, where it's like, I'm in Houston. I mean, I go to practice, I put on my helmet. I'm not living a celebrity lifestyle to whereas in Dallas, I mean, I am constantly the center of attention. Everything is circled around me. And I mean, Schultz was a big name in Dallas. I mean, obviously not as big as Dak Prescott or Zeke when he was there, DeMarcus Lawrence, now Micah Parsons, but he was a big part of what Dallas was. So for him, I get it where it's just I just want to focus on football. Yes, I am technically part of the entertainment, but I don't want to be into the entertainment at the same time. I want to play ball. I want to do my job. Like I don't want the extras that come with it, the paparazzi, constantly in the media, constantly in the news. And I don't think he was wrong for what he was saying. Because I mean, that does kind of get exhausting. I think, especially for guys that love the game so much, where it's just like, why can't I just play ball? You know, why am I constantly always having to be one of those guys where everything is focused on me? That's quite exhausting, and I get it, man. I really get Schultz and where he's coming from.
Yeah, and I just back on the Jerry Jones point. Like you even go back to the '90s days with Jimmy Johnson, the early '90s, obviously when they won the back-to-back championships in the '92 and '93, and then what they won the other one in '95. Like even those days, Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson to get along very well, and it took them a very long time to get Jimmy Johnson back actually in the Ring of Honor, which
Ring of
actually
Honor.
happened, this year.
Yep.
Finally, for a guy that coached in the '90s, won back-to-back titles, to wait until 2024, 2023 rather, about what 30 is it? What 30 years later? 30 years later, after they won in '93, to get him into the Ring of Honor, to have it take that long, that's a problem. And I think just for Jerry Jones himself, that should have been a eye-opening moment to take a step back, because they didn't get along. If it wasn't for Jimmy Johnson, there's a good chance, who knows what the '90s
Those
Cowboys
Super
would have been.
Bowls, yeah,
Yeah, wouldn't have happened.
might not happen.
No, and then they really be in a bad spot, because then what? Before that, it was probably the '70s, right, with Roger Staubach. I mean, you'd be talking about a team. You'd be talking about a team with maybe one or two Super Bowl wins, not winning one since the '70s if it wasn't for Jimmy Johnson. So that's the problem with Jerry Jones. Like if that wasn't eye opening for you, then I don't know what is. I don't know what
You
is.
know, here's here's the thing too. Now that I kind of think about it, I feel like I just like the light bulb kind of went off. Where again, how I kind of just said with Jerry Jones is all WWE entertainment, and it's all for the fun of it, because this is random, but it's going to tie in all together. It's going to make sense. Let's talk about jersey retirements for an example. So we've had these great 88s, Drew Pearson, Michael Irvin, Dez Bryant, and now we got CeeDee Lamb wearing it, to where usually, for any other team, that jersey would already be retired. But for Jerry Jones, it's like, oh, now we got this next great receiver, this next great 88. I mean, this Showtime guy. Let's throw him in that number,
Yeah.
and let's let him entertain the fans. Everybody wants to see another 88 in Dallas. Everyone wants to see another 22 in Dallas with Emmitt Smith, another
Yeah.
number 8, another Troy Aikman. And that's all the entertainment of it. I mean, usually players like that with such an impact, that number would already be retired and up in the rafters. But it's just like, let's go draft somebody who we think is going to be this next great Dez Bryant, this next great Michael Irvin. Let's throw him in this 88. Everyone's going to buy the jersey. Everyone's going to love it. It's entertainment. It's revenue. That's all it is for Jerry Jones. And I know I've said it 14 times already today, but for Jerry, it's like, hey, if I just say the right things, that's all I need. I mean, y'all are still gonna come to the games. Y'all still gonna come to the pro shop and buy the uniforms and all this other stuff. You're still gonna do the tours, but I just don't think he's taking it as seriously as he needs to. And unless he takes a step back, they are not winning another Super Bowl.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's meddlesome owners, teams that have those type of owners, they don't win a whole lot. It's just the way it is. And it's just tough to coach there. It's tough, when you have, it feels like when you get hired. Now Jason Garrett was a little bit different. He was there for a while. I guess he probably a little bit more of a longer leash on Jason Garrett. But for McCarthy and any coach moving forward, it's almost like McCarthy gets fired this year. It's like I've got a 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 year window to do. And you can make the case too that McCarthy might have been fired already because they kind of gave him a pass for the year that Dak got hurt. So you could technically make a case he might have been fired already. If they never because they gave him a pass for that year, it felt, but that never happened. There's a good chance this probably would have been it for him. So it's like any coach that goes there now, you get a 2-3 year window. It's tough to win, lay your own foundation, bring in your own people in 2 to 3 years. It's tough.
Yep.
So it's gonna be interesting. But look, I mean, they'll be right back in the conversation again this year. It's just a matter of they can finish. And unfortunately, I don't know. It's tough, as long as Jerry Jones, that's what stinks about ownership. Believe me, I know you've seen it with Jerry Jones. I've seen it with Woody Johnson all these years. That's the problem. They don't go away. Very rarely do fan bases get their wish of an owner actually selling the team. And somebody like Jerry Jones, who actually does interviews during the week, he does post-game interviews after the playoff games. He is never selling that team. So
Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
my
very
point.
rare.
I'm not even gonna get on another ramble of that one, but that's what I tell people all the time. Where I mean, we are talking about a week 2 win over the Carolina Panthers, and Jerry Jones is doing interviews of how proud he is of the team. Like,
Yep.
just go home. Just go
Yeah.
home after the game. I mean, yeah, I'm not even gonna start on that one, but you hit that one right on the head.
Yeah, it's bad. Really bad. So anyway, we move on now to Buffalo, where a lot took place here over the last couple of days. They're definitely a team that has made some moves here prior to free agency. They cut 6 players, a couple of them being key pieces to the squad to try and make some room for cap. So they moved on from Trey White, Jordan Poyer, Naeem Hines, Mitch Morse, Cyron Neal, and Deontay Hardy. So those are the 6 guys they moved on from. Obviously, the biggest names from that list is Poyer, Trey White, Naeem Hines, Hardy as well. But the biggest ones, I believe, are White and Poyer because they've been there for a while. Trey White, when he was healthy before the injuries, it's unfortunate that he got hurt. Before he got hurt and all these injuries with the torn Achilles and the ACL, in back-to-back years, or like it's before that happened, he was one of the better corners in the game. So it's tough to see kind of his drop off there. Always tough to see when really good players get hurt. But the Bills have a lot of work to do. They had to clear a lot of cap. They did, but they're in a really interesting spot. Buffalo, it's an interesting offseason for them. It's another one of these off seasons where they fall short of their ultimate goal. They lose to the Chiefs once again. It's another one of these off seasons where there's some speculation around Diggs. What do they do? And you just wonder how many more years does the Bills have in them to continue to run it back with the Diggs, the Allens? How many more years of this? It's not going to last forever. So what are your reactions to this Buffalo news where they basically got rid of everybody? I'm surprised they didn't cut some fans and stuff like that because it felt like they were heading in that direction of cutting down their fan base a little bit.
Well, by any chance, are you familiar with Call of Duty Zombies?
I believe so. Yeah, they just spray and pray.
They are. I was gonna say they're on a fire sale, and that's when you
Yeah.
can continue to just hit the gun box and just it's
Yep.
like 10 cents compared to however much it costs. I feel like they're on a
Mhm.
fire sale with their players. They're just going down the list, and they're just he's out and he's out and he's out, and just keep tapping that button. I mean, Poyer, White. We're talking about guys, and I agree where those are 2 of the biggest names that stand out. But I mean, they are a part of what Buffalo built, and they are a part of that team where they know where like we're right there. I mean, we just got to get over that Mahomes hump, and I mean, they are the Cowboys of the AFC, but
Yeah.
that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But they're kind of right there, and they're just cutting ties loose with everybody. I mean, Gabe Davis seems like he's going to be out. We didn't even talk about Gabe Davis yet.
Mhm.
Stephon Diggs has seemed to have been growing unhappy for like the last 2 to 3 years. He might be out. And with the cap space, I mean, there's how we kind of said off air, there's one guy, Von Miller, that seems to
Yep.
be, a huge reason in just with his contract. But they just seem they don't seem as a team where the championship window is right there and they just need to sign a piece or two, maybe tweak some things here and there to get over that hump and finally get to the Super Bowl. It kind of seems like they maybe listen to what you had to say about them. We spoke about Buffalo so much, where the championship window is done. They're kind of just like,
Yeah.
to hell with it at this point. Let's just clear up what we can clear up, maybe make a few splashes in free agency, but it doesn't feel like they're making the moves for a team that's literally right there to a Super Bowl. It seems like they're going backwards.
Yeah, it's almost like this off season's a little bit of a maybe like a retool. Cut
Mm-hmm.
ties with some of these old players, get a little bit more younger guys in here. Poyer's up there in age. although still very solid. Trey White's obviously up there in age. And the same thing with Micah Hyde. He's 33. He's been in the league since 2013. Like, I guess more. I mean, White's not very old, but the injuries and stuff like that
Yeah.
have certainly aged him a little bit more, especially for a guy at corner to have those two major injuries like that certainly help or hurt. And then we've obviously got Gabe Davis as well. Like you said, he'll hit the open market. He's relatively younger, but he's just a little inconsistent. They need number 2 wide receiver. They've got James Cook. Of course, Allen's still there, assuming, let's say, Diggs remains. But yeah, it's like a little bit of a youth movement. They're going to bring in some draft guys. Maybe they probably draft a number 2 receiver and a Donnie Mitchell, a Troy Franklin, a Keon Coleman, somebody like that. That'll probably fall, more towards the late 20s. I don't know if Xavier Worthy's 40-yard dash is going to get teams to believe he's a first-round guy. I feel like he's more still a day 2, but you never know. We've seen surprises before in the NFL draft, especially when you get late day 1, early day 2. There's it's not much of a difference from going 28th overall to 34th overall. It's just, 6, 7 picks apart. So either way, feels like it's a little bit of a retool this offseason. And last year was just a wild season. You fire your offensive coordinator. You've got all these problems with the offense. They don't look like they're going to make the playoffs. They end up going on a run. They had make the argument they had their best chance to take down Kansas City at home. They didn't do that. Smack in the face for them. And they've got some questions. I don't know. I still feel like their Super Bowl window is probably closed as well. Like I don't know how many more years you can continue to go back. And they just keep running the same team back. Maybe I just don't know if bringing in a Keon Coleman in the draft is going to put them over the top. It just, you just wonder if that core is really good enough. It's interesting spot, but they got a lot of work to do, and they've created this weekend, which they needed to clear cap space. I agree with that, but now they've also created some areas of need. You're looking at a new receiver. You're looking at, a new safety tandem. Now they did extend Taylor Rapp. The linebackers as well, they could potentially add there. So they're they got a lot to do. I don't know. I mean, like, how do you see the AFC's lining up next year? Do you still think it's the Bills' division? Because even the Dolphins, you have concerns about them as well. The way they're going to handle free agency. They gave up, they got rid of some guys. They've got a lot of free agents. They've also got to figure out the whole Tua stuff. They've got to sign him long term. The AFC East is in a weird spot. I still believe it's the Bills' division to lose, just because ever since Brady left, it's been their division every single year. So if they got rid of Stephon Diggs, then I would say, yeah, but nothing like they're going to still have Allen and Diggs, I think, week 1. As long as they have those two guys, they're going to be they're going to be 11-win team. They're going to make the playoffs. Whether or not they go far, well, we haven't seen that happen. But do you still feel it's their division to win? If the Jets get some stuff figured out, I think they'll be in the conversation. Miami, New England's irrelevant. They're going to stink. But how do you see that division playing out next year before free agency begins?
I think I'm gonna agree with you. And I think you said it perfectly where that division is a mess and everything just seems so scrambled. But with all going wrong for Buffalo and the whole division, it's still there. I don't fully believe in Miami. Perfect point of New England. Same with the Jets. They could be, some competition there if they got a lot of work themselves, as you know. So for Buffalo, yeah, I mean, the division is still theirs, and until somebody comes and take it, I don't see them losing the division, if that makes any sense. Where basically it's still theirs. They're still top team, and I just don't see any other teams coming and taking that division from them. But for Buffalo, I mean, I guess you really just got to figure it out because sooner or later, Miami might be that team to come take it. I just don't continue to see Miami slip up where we're starting at 9-3 or we're 8-4, whatever the case is for Miami, and there's just a December disaster like the last 2 years. So for Buffalo, I do think the championship window is closed, but
Mm-hmm.
also kind of looking at the rest of the division, at least, it's kind of hard to say because I mean, as long as you're winning the division, you are in competition to be in the Super Bowl. So I know it kind
Yeah.
of contradicts itself just a little bit, but I just don't think any of the other teams are ready to overtake the East yet from Buffalo.
Yeah, the whole Super Bowl window thing is interesting because it's not like look, they'll have a chance. If they win 11 games
Yeah.
next year and they get any team that gets into the dance, you have a chance. It's not always a great chance, but you have a chance, the Packers where they didn't blow that lead against the Niners, they who would have ever thought that a 7 seed would have went on the road and won 2 games against the 2 top teams in the NFC. They almost did that. So you have a shot as long as you make it, but it just seems like with their core, like we said, they just can't get over the hump of a Kansas City or even a Cincinnati. They've shown the inability to beat them as well, you know, both in the regular season, of course, in the playoffs. And then you've obviously got the Ravens as well. Dolphins, they've handled pretty good, and until you've got teams like the Chargers that'll be coming up the pipeline. So the AFC continues to remain strong, which will make it difficult for all teams. Now, we'll remain here in the AFC before we get to some free agency predictions. Mac Jones potentially getting traded. What is your thoughts on that? And in just the whole Patriot situation, because they're irrelevant, but how do you feel they're going to use that pick?
Well, for their years to come of suffer, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's one of the fan bases they're up there in Philly for fan bases that I dislike. But
Mm-hmm.
for the Patriots, I mean, I kind of see it two ways where I don't think Mac Jones is the answer whatsoever, but you kind of similar to Carolina, like you look at those weapons in New England and you're just like, nobody would be successful with this team. I don't even think Patrick Mahomes might find success with that Patriots roster. Like it's really just that bad. But then again, I also don't think Jones is the answer. I think they need to move forward and draft young, which they're it's looking like they might be Jaden Daniels next year. Come on for the Patriots, but they got a lot of work to do. They're on that list of teams with a lot of work to do, a lot of ground to make up, especially in that division. Very similar to the Giants situation, where you got the two that will always run the division, and it goes through them. But for them, it's going to be I see like a 5 to 6 year window before the Patriots actually get back good. I know that might sound crazy, but they just don't have the pieces they need over there, especially with the new head coach. I mean, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, they stink to just put it simply. I'm very glad about them. They're being irrelevant. It's been a while, but yeah, they need a quarterback. They really don't have much receivers at all. They could use playmaker help everywhere. Running back, receiver, quarterback. Or tight end. You can basically make an argument that every single position they have could use an upgrade. Like you really could.
Absolutely.
Now I know you got Christian Gonzalez in the secondary, and he did some, good things last year as a rookie, but he also only played 4 games, so you didn't see much of him at all, which is not exactly great for a corner. You wanted them to get as many opportunities as possible. Mike Onwenu, was one of their better offensive linemen, he'll hit the open market this year. And then you've also got, and I know you still have got guys like Matt Judon and stuff, but those are also guys that are older, and you
Yeah.
wonder how much gas they really have left in the tank. He's 31 years old, been around for a while. How much does he really have left? The biggest thing is they don't have a quarterback. That's the biggest thing. They're going to need a rookie. So you can almost guess that it's going to at least be in a year or two. But I'll be honest, I'm a little worried about the rookie that goes there because they don't have much talent around them. And I know they'll look to build that, but the Patriots just recently have not had a very good luck of. Now I know they've cleaned house and stuff, but you have a first-time head coach, you have a first-time quarterback, you officially wiped the dynasty slate clean. A lot of times people forget the Patriots were a pathetic organization prior to Belichick getting there. Like they were pathetic. I could see that run happening again. And they're just I'm not saying that they're going to be Carolina, but the way their roster is constructed, they're going to put their quarterback into a situation where they have no weapons around him. And that's similar to Carolina. They gave Bryce Young nothing. So they had to wipe it clean, but new beginning, fresh voice in Gerard Mayo. But when you have a 20-year run of the same coach, there's gonna be a fallout afterwards. So they're definitely a team that's gonna be in the rebuilding phase for a while. And hopefully my message to the Patriots is just take your time. Take your time. No need to rush the rebuild. No need to go out there and do anything. Just take your time. It's a smart decision. Please, feel free to suck for 10 years. That is perfectly fine by me. Be terrible for 10 years. It's all right. Draft the bust here this year. Never hurts to draft the bust. Believe me, I've seen it a lot.
Trade for
Never,
Zach
never.
Wilson. I
Yeah,
mean,
trade for Zach Wilson. Not a bad strategy. Not a bad strategy. He can't.
bridge
He couldn't
quarterback.
beat the Patriots. So, you know, maybe he'll work in the system. System quarterback, Zach Wilson, big guy. So anyway, we'll close things out here with some free agency predictions. Are there any guys that you're looking at to potentially, or any guys that you're looking at on the top of your list that are any predictions on where some of these guys will go?
Yeah, I have a few. I thought you were gonna say
Mm-hmm.
looking at for Dallas. I'm gonna say I'm looking at a few who they could, but they're not gonna bring any
Mm-hmm.
of them in. But definitely Saquon. I know we talked about him earlier. I mean, I'm kind of interested to see where he goes with his decision. I know Philly and Dallas is kind of where his interests are at right now. But if the Houston ideal is not completely closed, Saquon with that Houston offense, I feel could be very dangerous. Tyler Boyd's another one. Joe Mixon. I know Cincinnati said there's probably chance neither one of them come back with the franchise tag on T. Higgins. So I kind of want to see where the two of those go. I think Mixon is still one of those better backs who I would love to see in Dallas. Him and Tyler Boyd. I mean, bring both of them. I would like to see both of them in Dallas just because you know what you're getting from them. They're consistent. And with Mixon, I know this was probably his worst year statistically, but I really don't think I see that drop off, kind of how we see a lot of other running backs go through. I think he still has a lot in the tank, and he can be very successful wherever he goes. So I'm kind of hoping for Mixon. It's a Dallas type thing for him. Tyler Boyd definitely. There's another one, and I know we just spoke on it, but Gabe Davis. I mean, you are 100% with inconsistency for him, but I mean, Big Game Dave is a real guy. It's very similar to
Yeah.
like playoff Jimmy. So there's just a few games where you're just like, it's time to show up. I think Gabe Davis can go somewhere and be a very solid number two option for a lot of teams, and will find instant success and help take them over the top. And I know it might sound crazy, but I think I like Gabe Davis in Kansas City. I know he would probably be hated in all of Upper New York for probably the rest of his life, but I mean, just somebody that, you know, I think everybody gets like plus 10 attributes when you're playing with Patrick Mahomes. So I think Gabe Davis goes to Kansas City. That can be a big help with the younger guys they got. And Kelsey's kind of getting to that point in his career where they are going to have to find some other options to kind of take some pressure off Kelsey. So I like that fit for him if he can end up in Kansas City.
Yeah, there's a lot. This is just a really good deep year for receivers, both
Free
through the draft
agency in
and through free
general.
agency. Yeah, it's even through trade too. Like you've got Mike Williams possibly from LA. You got Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy from Denver. There's a lot of guys that are, who knows? Maybe Stephon Diggs. If he remains unhappy, maybe there is something actually brewing there, and he wants out. There's a lot of guys that are going to be on this that are going to be looking out for. Of course, you've obviously got the top of the list for free agent wide receivers is like Calvin Ridley. From just a Jet perspective, I'd be okay with it. The biggest question is he going to be willing to come here, and how much money he's going to want, because now that Calvin Ridley is going to want all the money because he's the top. Many believe he's the top guy on the list. So, the biggest thing for me, just from a Jet perspective, my biggest worry with the receivers is who's going to want to come here when the future of this team is up in the air. Like you might not know who the quarterback is next year, the coach and the general manager. They could potentially blow it all up at the end of this year. So as a receiver, that his position is so reliant on the quarterback, why would you want to sign a 4-year deal here when 75% of those years are question marks? So that is a little bit of a concern, but Ridley's a guy I like. I could see Ridley too going to Kansas City. There's a lot of guys I could see going to Kansas City potentially. Also, Houston's another destination as well that I could see a handful of these guys. Some guys that I don't love the whole OBJ thing. I'm not a big fan of
I'm not,
OBJ entering
I'm
this
not,
free agency.
I'm not buying into it. I
Mm-hmm.
think, I don't know. I think he's getting to that third option kind of thing. I just don't see him going anywhere and having an OBJ like impact. I don't love it either.
Yeah. I don't either. He didn't have a very good year last year. A lot of people
Yeah.
hyped up his season last season. He wasn't that good. Like there was 5 to 6 receivers on this list that had better numbers than OBJ last year. I'm just not a big fan. So I would, as a 3 maybe, but there's not a like. I just don't understand why I couldn't see the Chiefs going out there bringing OBJ and relying on him to be their 1. I don't see it. So OBJ, not a big fan of. Tyler Boyd, I like. The biggest thing is with him, he's been a 3 there in Cincinnati for a little while. So I look at more teams that might need a third receiver rather than actually a number 2. Could a team, I don't know, maybe Buffalo, probably not because they just got rid of everybody. They also have Khalil Shakir, but maybe a team like Houston, maybe Houston brings in, maybe if they feel Tank
Well,
Dell and Nico Collins could do well, and maybe they feel he
well,
can come in as a veteran guy, but
here's my thing on Boyd. Do you think he's incapable of being a 2? Because I mean, he has been a 3. He's been a very solid 3, and I think compared
mhm.
to other wide receiver 3s that we've seen in the NFL, I mean, he is the top of the wide receiver 3. Usually that's just a third down guy, maybe a guy's not having the best of a game. So that's where your wide receiver 3 comes in. The only other one I can probably think of in the NFL that is a big time wide receiver 3 is maybe Josh Reynolds with
Mhm.
the Lions. Other than that, that's kind of an unheard guy. So with him, I'm thinking, at least I just want to know what you think on it. I think he could go somewhere and be a very solid and productive 2 with a
Yeah.
bigger role, just considering, I mean, you played with 2 wide receiver 1s, in front of you for quite some time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like Boyd personally. I think he's solid. But there's been a lot of people that are concerned though if he can make the transfer back to wide receiver 2, because recently he's been a wide receiver 3. But I agree with you. He could still be a very solid wide receiver 2. You go back to 2018, 2019, before they had all, the chase and all that stuff. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons as a 2. He had a very successful career in Cincinnati. There was a tail end there where, when AJ Green was kind of nearing the end of his days, there was an end there where Tyler Boyd was actually kind of taking over the role as the 1. So he was very solid there. Had good back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons there. But, just have questions of, at this point in his career, he's going to be 30 next year. Can you rely on him to be a 2 on like a playoff team? Like for the Jets, for example, would you really feel confident as a Jet fan with Boyd being your number 2 and then, I don't know, Ricky Pearsall bringing him and potentially just using him as an example as your 3? Look, I wouldn't, or more as your slot guy, I would be okay with it, but you could do better. I think a Cortland Sutton's probably better. I think Mike Williams is probably better trading those guys. So I like Boyd. I don't know how teams view him. Like, you feel teams still view him as a number 2?
I think that's tough again because I mean you are living in the shadows of Jamar Chase and
Yeah.
T Higgins for so long, but if you're Tyler Boyd, I mean, kind of how you just did here, like if you go pull up their numbers and you're just like, look, kind of like a resume, like hey, this was me as a wide receiver
Mhm.
too. I mean,
Yeah.
I can get the job done. I I think he's capable, but I think I am going to agree with you where I don't think teams are going to bring him in as that number 2. I think it's going to be he's going to come in as a 3 and just through as the season progresses, he might jump into that role of number 2 depending on what team he's with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how, there is definitely some teams that could use a third guy. There's also obviously some teams that could use that number 2. So look, he'll probably look to be a number 2 because that's what's gonna ultimately make him more money. You're obviously gonna get paid a lot more to be a 2 than a 3. So he's definitely one of the interesting names on this list. You also got Michael Thomas on here. Curtis Samuel, I like, really good at getting yards through
Gadget guy.
yak. He can go deep. I like him a lot. I think, I don't know where I might rank him of maybe like, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Marquise. Marquise Brown is Hollywood Brown's interesting. I'd probably like Samuel better. Samuel's up there. Samuel Boyd. Those are the guys I like. You've also got you enter then the Gabe Davis territory. So, any other names? Just general free agency that. Any other predictions or thoughts?
Another one we talked about, Justin Simmons, one of the better
Yep.
free safeties in the league. Kind of curious on where he goes. I mean, a lot of teams need some safeties, and I think every team right now, you would instantly get better with him on your defense. So that's another one that stands out.
Yeah, and then just going over to quarterbacks here for a second. Um, you've obviously got Baker Mayfield probably going back to Tampa. Kirk Cousins is interesting. He's the biggest question mark. Where is he going to go? Is he going to go back to Minnesota? Is he going to go elsewhere? Jacoby Brissett, I think, is probably going to go on to a team. I could see him with the Jets potentially as a backup. There's a couple guys on here, though. Tannehill, like Russell Wilson, we talked about. Pittsburgh, Giants, I don't see. Like the Raiders, probably not. Pittsburgh seems to be the team that's really in on Russell Wilson. I could see Gardner Minshew going to a team where Gardner Minshew's interesting because I could see him going to a team where he's trying to fight for a job. Like Vegas, I don't think would be a bad landing spot for Minshew, potentially.
I agree.
I don't think it'd be a bad spot. There's a couple teams. Even Pittsburgh wouldn't be a bad spot. He's kind of that bridge quarterback. He's going to keep you competitive. He almost got the Colts to the playoffs. I also think he's going to want to go to a place that he can start because he showed what he was able to do last year. So back a quarterback, there's some names there as well. But yeah, a couple days. Monday starts it all. So looking forward to that and see what all happens. There's always going to be that one overpay. Somebody's going to get overpaid, way overpaid. Hopefully it's not the Jets that do that. But any other closing thoughts here to finish things off?
Yeah, one more name, Derrick Henry. News
Yep.
just broke yesterday that he will not be returning to Tennessee. I believe 30 years in age, but I wonder kind of how much he has left in the tank. So I think that's another name I'm excited to see. Other than Derrick Henry, I know free agency does start on Monday, so it's this might be the most exciting it's probably ever been in my life. Kind of feels very similar to like the NBA trade deadline
Yeah.
where some bigger names are getting moved around. So I'm actually very excited for free agency on Monday.
Yeah, the running back market's another good one. You've got Henry, you've obviously got Josh Jacobs, Saquon as well.
Mixon,
Is another name. And
Pollard,
then
Madison,
Pollard,
a lot of
Eckler.
guys.
Yep. J.K. Dobbins as well. Singletary is on a little bit of the lower list, but Singletary, I think, is a solid guy for a team that already has a legitimate number one running back. He could be definitely a good veteran, too. We saw what he was able to do last year. So, yeah, there's a lot of good names. Free agency is always exciting. It's a great opportunity to, look, you never know what free agents are going to be, but sometimes it all depends. But, the draft, I feel like, is more unknown than free agency. The draft, while it's exciting to bring a new talent, you ultimately don't know what that talent is. Rather than free agency, you're bringing in some guys that are already proven. So it's always exciting. It's always fun to get all the notifications on your phone of everybody signing in. And of course, when you're 2 hours in and your team doesn't do anything, you start panicking. So that should be fun. That always
Been there
happens.
before, and I'm already prepared for it. So
Yep. Always have
insanity.
to always got to be ready. So that'll do it for another episode of Inside the Huddle. As always, please like and subscribe. We'll be back next week recapping all the free agency craziness and discussing all the latest stories around the NFL. So stay tuned for that, and thanks for watching.